Hi, I'm Nima. This is my mom, Destiny, and she will be joining me for my essay, my final project, and my ethnic studies course. And this is just a recorded podcast interview thing. Kind of want to have, I like talk shows, so I thought this would be a good idea. And my mom here is going to introduce herself, so give us a little brief introduction.
Hello, everyone. My name is Destiny. I am Nima's mom. As she said, I currently work at a private pre-K through 12th grade school in Orange County.
Okay, also, what is your degree in? That will be valuable to know.
Okay, so my bachelor's degree is in organizational management, and my master's degree is in positive organizational psychology and program evaluation.
Great. And so also tell us what your role is at your job and the different committees that you sit on.
Okay, so I work as an administrative assistant to two senior administrators, do a lot of strategic planning for the school, as well as DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We currently have an equity team, and I am the chair of the professional development committee.
Great, thank you. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you as my guest because, this is kind of right in your lane. And this is the stuff that you work on at your job and the different people that you work with, your bosses. So I thought it would be interesting to have your intake on it. And prior to this meeting, I had you read The Possessiveness and Whiteness by George Lipsitz, and just so you have some background information, because that is something we're going to be focusing on, and also intersectionality. But you already have prior knowledge to that because coincidence for your equity work, they had you guys watch videos by Dr. Kimberle Crenshaw. So just that was cool that you already know about her and are familiar with intersectionality. And so first, I just wanted to give a quick definition on what ethnic studies is, specifically my course. So, the way we defined it in the class is the study of difference, how different populations have experienced, survived, and critically engaged the US nation building project. So, it's complicated concepts and variety of experiences and all these different backgrounds. And not only do we exist in the United States, but we also have helped build it to what it is today. And I think that was something really interesting to me, how it's not just there's different ethnic backgrounds in the US, but also we're a part of building the United States and what it is today. So any questions so far?
No, thank you for that definition.
Okay. So first, we're going to talk about George's book excerpt. So just a quick background. So his excerpt, it touches on a whole bunch of different topics. It talks about white supremacy, racism, anti-blackness. The one that we're going to be focusing on, because it's more in what you do with your job, is community and how we or society has really invested in white community and white institutions and white neighborhoods, and just really making sure that the white students, the white kids are set up to succeed and to have a neighborhood to look back on and to like raise their kids in a healthy environment. So that's really what I wanted to focus on. So my first question for you was, what were some of your biggest takeaways from that excerpt?
So I thought in general it was very enlightening and just put some facts into things that we've been hearing a lot of. Just, people say things, but you don't often hear the actual facts or stories that they're referring to. And so I found the whole thing very enlightening, as I said. But there were like three things that really stuck out to me. And the first one is that this whole basis, the whole foundation of what this discrimination is about, which is in this case racism, is based on nothing that's biological. It's like this just idea that white people are better than black people, and there's no foundation, there's no like truth to what really is different. Just so that in itself is just like, what are we even talking about here? Like we're causing all these problems about what? Just this idea. So that was one. Two is that there's as the author put it, there's this snarling contempt type of racism where it's like horrible, nasty things that people are doing and it's on the surface and you can see it. And there's that. And unfortunately, that is still happening. But another issue, the other side of it is about the systems that are set in place, not the stuff that's you don't necessarily see with your eyes. And so systems thinking is something that was discussed in graduate school in regards to evaluation, is that there's different decision points along the way in any system that'll change the trajectory of those that are involved in that system. So let's take higher education, for example. It's not just about who gets admitted to certain schools. Right. It's about who even applies to these certain schools. And if a student who has less AP courses in high school may feel like they don't even qualify, so they don't apply. And what if who gets into AP courses is based on maybe a student doesn't feel like they can do the extra work in that course because maybe both of their parents work from home, or maybe there's just one parent. And so they have to help with their siblings. So they don't feel like they can't do the extra work. So then they don't apply for the classes. Then they don't have the classes on their transcripts. So then they don't feel like they can apply. So then they're not even getting into the school. So it's like along all the way, there's these different points that can contribute to the problem. And it's not simply just about, well, who gets in. So that's the first two. And then the third one more thing I wanted to say about that is that not only are there so many systems that are advantageous for white people, but they're also disadvantageous for people of color. So it's not like it's a neutral system.
It's simultaneously working against and
right,
for.
Exactly. So that's something that is important to look at. So then the third takeaway is that it talked about opposing the problems in whiteness is not the same as opposing white people. What people of color aren't trying to say is we want the white people to do poorly. What we're saying is that we don't want Black people or other people of color to be pigeonholed into this path that forces them to do poorly. Right. So those are my three biggest takeaways.
Okay. And I love those points because that's something that for me, when I read it, that wasn't something that stuck out to me. So you brought in quotes that I was like, oh yeah, he also did say this. So talking about the systems in place along the way, especially for that K through 12, or let's just even focus on high school in general. So at your own private school, what do you see? Like from reading that excerpt to, okay, let me look at my own job. Like, what do you see, like how the kids are being set up for success and to have the courage and the background to apply to these well-known upper schools?
So one thing, fortunately, that I notice is that there is a lot of tuition assistance for students to be able to go to that school whose parents cannot afford to go to that school. So right there, again, we can have students there who can afford. So great, that opens the doors a little bit. But as we know, it's not just about getting in. It's like, what happens once you're in? So in addition to that, they are given these students, there's some additional monies that they have so they can participate in other things. And so it's not just like if there's like this cool trip that, they can do, there's also money that's allowed for them to do that or buy things, maybe they need to buy some resources that they don't have to be able to participate. So I fortunately see that that not only are we helping them get in, but while they are there, they are allowed to, or they are helped in a way that allows them to really feel a part of the community. And also there are some connections that we make with them and for some other people to help them network and to help them as they go along and graduate so they can go into the world with, again, even more help to help them, to help make it more equitable, again, not equal, because equal equality and equity are not the same thing. So what
Right.
that means is that we have to, because they're already at a disadvantage, we have to do things to bolster them up so then they can be on the same level playing field as much as we can in that environment.
Okay, thank you. So kind of going that like covered the basis of my next question, which was, can you see some of the topics you covered in your own community or workplace? So to expand on that more, even just the city that you live in, South Orange County, where I know for myself, someone who's moved a lot, which of course you know, and who's gone to very different schools and different demographics and lived on West Coast and East Coast. Living in Orange County is already, I can see the differences, and especially the school that you work at versus the schools that I went to. So just with all of that, like some of the stuff that he touched on in the book, like did anything click for you? You were like, oh yeah, I see that.
So what was interesting for me is that I feel like, as you know, I went to the same high school that you graduated from. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like the disparity between the different people, like what we're talking about, private school versus public,
Okay.
happened within the same school. You have the
Mm-hmm.
people that came from one neighborhood and their life was completely different, and then you have the people that came from other neighborhoods, and it was all happening right there. And so I remember being at school, and what is it, sophomore, junior year, people start getting their own cars. Like they were getting
Yeah.
brand new cars, and here I was having to go to the PE teacher, can you just give me a lock, because we can't afford to buy a lock for my locker. So there was that. And then I remember when you were a student, for certain schools that you went to, you would get extra credit if you bought in supplies for the school, which
Oh yeah.
sounds great, supplies for the school, but when you're struggling,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have that money, so you're putting in, so if we have money and we can buy tissues for the school or paper, then you get a better grade. Like something about that just seems so wrong to me. So that
And
is a
then just
system. Go
real
ahead.
quick too, I just like that symbolizes kind of how society works too, especially when it comes to education for minority students or students of different socioeconomic backgrounds. So for me, living with a single mom, single income household, I could barely get the supplies for my projects that I had to do, let alone let me bring in this extra stuff so I can get 5 points extra. So I just feel like that kind of symbolizes for education in America, really.
Right, and you brought up a point I was going to bring up, is when it's like your kid needs a poster board and markers and this and that, and it was a problem. I mean, it was created a problem, and that just right there was something that seemed like, and on the surface doesn't look like a bad idea, right? It looks like we need no
Mhm.
more supplies, or we want to do a project. It's fun. Something, get away from worksheets. Let's do a project.
Yeah.
But it's set up in a system that is unfair to people who don't have certain resources. So, and I think that's what the author kept saying, is like, you have to look, this isn't about people being outright nasty. And again, that happens too, but this is about what are we doing to continue to perpetuate these cycles of these systems and feed into it. And they also said that you don't have to be white to reap the benefits of these systems. So it's just, what are we doing, and at what point does it bother us enough to do something about it? And one thing, when they were talking about the individual that was murdered, they were saying that the reason he fought for it was because it was intolerable to him. The
Mm.
racism was intolerable. Not that he could think for the Black people, oh, that must be horrible for you. It was like, this isn't okay. So at what point are people across the board, but especially in this case, we're talking about the privilege and of whiteness, but at what point are those people who reap the benefit for that privilege going to feel like it's intolerable enough to do something about it?
And that brought up a question for me, for your job specifically, because I'm sure there are people at your job who have always been feeling a certain type of way or always wanted to do the work or have been doing the work. But just because of the events that we saw over 2020, do you feel like the sense, because there's more conversations that were being held, so do you feel like now you see more white people starting to be intolerable? Because I mean, your school, like the demographics of like Orange County, of course, as we all know, it's predominantly white. So, you know, your school, the demographics kind of reflect Orange County within itself. So, you know, like,
I,
do you see that?
I think to clarify your question, you're asking if I feel that the racism has become intolerable for the white people, right? So in that
Yes.
case, yes, I've actually had conversations with people who have lived in certain environments and it hasn't been a thing for them. It hasn't been
Mhm.
a problem they've ever seen they've ever seen before or have been had their eyes open to. And I know like you and I had discussed all the horrible things that have happened and happened throughout the years, but because it happened this time at a time when so many people were stopped and couldn't be running to this and running to that and back and forth and going to the movies and all, we were all stopped and forced to see it. And I think that
Mhm.
has caused more people to say, wait a minute, like what you guys were saying this whole time is really happening. It's really true.
Right.
Somebody was tortured in a sense and killed in broad daylight. And I mean, and so that I think spoke to a lot of people. And it also brought the conversation, brought the dialogue up, which wouldn't have been happening otherwise. So as horrible as it was, the things that have happened, I think that it helped to set some change. And I think that's a good thing.
So within that change, are you seeing the possessiveness shift a little bit? So, you know, the institution itself was something that really was set up for and cared to the white students and the white residents of Orange County. Not that it excluded other students, non-white students, but you know, it wasn't set up for them necessarily. So are you seeing, okay, we can't just focus on our own kids. We can't just focus on in our own neighborhoods. We have to like really shift here. Like we have to start really lifting up these other students.
I think definitely. And I think other isms are also being called out, and so that's good. There's so much work to do, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
because this is the work that I do, I see it happening every day. Every day there's a conversation about something. Every day there's a push. There's a new policy that's being looked at or something to help, and so that gives me hope. That I can contribute to the work to help make things more equitable and to release some of the the possessive investments that the author talks about. And the author talked about, I don't mean just literally or figuratively, I mean both. So what are
Mm-hmm.
we doing? What are our investments, and what are they also talk about, what are we being possessed by in our investment?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I'm definitely seeing it. Like I said, it's a long road, but just knowing that so much work is being put into it, I just it gives me hope that everything will be. Here's a positive psychology. Everything will be great, and we can all learn to do better. So yeah, that's how I
So real quick, you already kind of answered this, but just if there was any other thing you wanted to add quickly about this last question with his article or his excerpt, sorry. Do you ever compare your school that you currently work at to some of the schools I attended? So like as a mom, as a parent, looking at, you know, the private school that you work at compared to the public schools that I went to.
So that's really a heavy question. I like how you
It
like just
is. I know.
put it in there, like just real quick. Because it's not real quick. Like as a mom, it was like, of course, I would have rather Nima had all these resources and all these people that really care about her education. And I'm not saying that you can't find that in public schools.
Right, because we all had our favorite teachers.
Right. However, and
Yeah.
and I wish that you would have had those things. I wish that you would have had more resources, and also wish that the system was in such a way that you would have flourished there. And that's the other thing is when we look at not just the institution that I work at, but the others, are those institutions ready to embrace people of color? Are they ready to understand that our hair is different and to
Yeah.
not look at us funny when we have, you know, interesting hair styles or what have your textures? So that's the thing. That's the I was at a webinar in a breakout room with a person from a different school who was saying that my kids are of age and I want to bring them. Is that a bad thing? Should I bring them to this institution where, and again, they didn't work at my job, but where they were worried about how they would be treated or how they would feel? And that's a real thing. It's like, it would have been nice for you to have those things. Why aren't the public schools set up to offer you those things? And if someone is so fortunate to be able to go to a private school, is that the best environment? So it's very much a loaded, multi-layered question. But I feel like you turned out pretty good. So
That's
so
true.
here we are.
Yes, not to ever, degrade public school or public education, because I'm a what's the word? I'm
Product.
a product, thank you, of a public school system. So it can work. And I had some really amazing teachers who helped me and really encouraged me and were there for me. So, and again, there's pros and cons at there's cons at a private school environment. There's no perfect system. But you ended on, it's a little question, and it's multifaceted, which kind of perfect segue into intersectionality.
Yeah.
Which was coined by the Dr. Kimberle Crenshaw. And what I really loved about this was she came up with this in a law environment. So, just to give people the background information. So basically she was looking at this case where it was this Black woman, and she applied to be at a workshop, but I can't think of the word. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, she applied for a certain position, a work position,
Yeah,
right?
she applied for a certain position at a car workshop, and she didn't get it. And she felt like she didn't get it not only because she was a woman applying to what is really a male-dominated field, but
Was it
also
manufacturing? I'm sorry, was it a car manufacturer? Like a warehouse? Okay.
people that work on cars, and I just cannot think of the name right now. So
oh my goodness. I was gonna say magician, but that's not the right word.
no, it's when you take your car to get it done, you take it to a mechanic. Thank you.
There you go.
So she applied to be a mechanic, and so she felt discriminated against, not only because she's a woman applying to a mechanic job, which we know is male dominated, but also a Black woman. And so when she took it to court, the judge was like, well, no, this isn't valid. Like, this won't hold. Like, what you're saying isn't true. They don't discriminate because they have Black workers and they have women workers, but the Black workers were the Black males working as a mechanic, and then the women workers were white females working in secretarial jobs or receptionist jobs. So her personal identity was at the intersection. She was, a Black person, but she was also a woman. So, but there was no Black woman working as a mechanic. Right. So it was just, and I loved how that was the case. And that's how she coined the term intersection, because she was literally at an intersection, like, with her discrimination. And, it's defined as multiple social identities intersect and form a whole, and how they can all be working simultaneously and working against you in society. And so I love the concept of intersectionality, because it just feels like almost all of us can really relate to it and see how it's working in our own lives. And so for you, how have you seen your own identities, intersecting in different areas of your life, especially in the workplace?
So I want to bring this idea home. I thought of another analogy from school when we learned about psychology and different things. So there's a rate of accidents that happen when there's bad driving conditions like weather, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a rate of how many accidents happen when people are on the phone. So you mix those two together, you have bad weather conditions and someone being on the phone, and my gosh, you're the the percent that you're going to get in a accident has increased exponentially.
Double, yeah.
Right. So I think of it like that. I have being a single mom was definitely a deal. Being
one.
being a woman, being a person of color,
but also
but
dive into that
also,
deeper.
pardon?
I said dive into that deeper, not only a person of color, but
biracial person of color.
Right. So this is my kind of like two.
It is. It's definitely two. So
that's 5 identities just right there.
Right. So when you mix all those together, it's a miracle that either one of us are doing well. And so
right.
I just it's so hard. I mean, life's hard, everything's hard, but when you mix those different things together and you figure out, like, just when you get over one thing or one hurdle, there's another one, so it's definitely been a lot compounded by other parts of me, other identities that I have embraced, and some that make certain things more difficult. But the combination of who I am, which I like and think I'm wonderful, and create a wonderful child, just make life sometimes a lot more difficult, because we we as in people have a hard time embracing those that are different from us and seeing other people's perspectives. And so I think if we just stop and listen and understand everybody's an individual and everybody has a story, how we can be better to each other, I think the world would be a better place.
And that was beautifully said. I know for myself, my main identities is also, like, I have a little sprinkle of Mexican in me from you, but I feel especially, and that's something that I've learned in this course is, what was it called? It was racially demographic, like racialization, but depending on geographically where you are and how that can mean different things. And so I remember growing up, I want to say in elementary school, you didn't really pay too much attention to like where you were, but for me, I always knew I was different because just looking around me, I didn't have the straight blonde hair, didn't have blue eyes, my skin was darker, and I was just different because there wasn't a lot of Black kids at the school. But then when I started getting older in middle school, I was like, oh, like, okay, like this is my identity and this is really something different. And then, but me being Black in Southern California in 6th grade meant a lot different than being Black in South Carolina in 7th and 8th grade and 9th grade, because I was part of the majority there. It was just like, and I feel like that's when I really could embrace my Blackness and really stepped into that. And just, it wasn't so much of, there's still problems, there's still issues, of course, we know, with the South, but it wasn't like, oh, you're Black, like, oh, you are, like, in school, like, it was like all these different Black people, and it can mean different things. Like, there's not just one specific type of Black person. And I think so. I had my identity strong, and then moving back to California from my sophomore to senior year, it was just like I felt so strong who I was, but then the environment around me was not at all ready for that, or just didn't really understand it. And I just know when I learned intersectionality from you, because you talked about like from work and stuff. So I knew that prior to coming into this class was just learning more about it and how just we really are kind of defined by our identities in the world. And I know for me, being a Black young woman and a student, like a college student, and just what that means, like that's something within itself also. And I just remember like the events that took place last semester or for fall semester, and like it was hard times. There's a lot going on for my community and stuff in the news, and I was just like not okay. Like I was just like looking around and I was just like, how are people functioning right now? Like I'm supposed to be focused on these assignments, but I'm seeing like the criminal justice system fail us once again. So I was like, what is this? And I remember, and because I talked to you about it. I emailed my professors and I was like, just a heads up, like some of your Black students right now might not be okay. And it's just like that stuff that we have to do. We have to, because people know our identities, but also this is different because it's online, so teachers don't know what we look like.
Right.
But sometimes we kind of have to present that or kind of remind our white counterparts that, like, again, this is a different life that we live and we're gonna have different experiences. And I think that's something that intersectionality kind of can help with, because it can bring attention to, okay, like this is something, like I'm a college student right now and that comes with its own stress, but also I'm a Black person in America and it's just like, what the heck.
Yeah, and for me, my intersectionalities allow me, in a sense, sometimes to be a bridge between my different identities and the experiences I have. Of course, my experiences are different than yours, but on the same hand, I'm also not white. So I don't have experiences of a white person. So I'm somewhere like in the middle. And so then I can help kind of connect because I can see different perspectives. So I've hopefully have been able to make a difference in my own way with my own intersection of and combination of my identities.
Mhm. And also, one just last question. So, you kind of had a little impromptu, brief dip your toe in the water of an ethnic studies course. Do you think this course should be taught and that in high schools, even middle schools? Like, should that start being implemented in K through 12?
I would say that it is very important to talk about not just there's people different than us, which is talked about already. It's there's people that are different than us. What does that mean? How do we all relate to each other? What can we do or not do to help each other? And what our America looks like or is going to look like is solely based on what how we treat each other. And so, of course, I think any, education about what this means and what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean that I'm better this than that than you. It just means I'm different. And some of the things aren't different. It's all just like appearance and how the genetics have looked on the outside. That's all it really is. So, and of course the culture. I mean, there's different in cultural, but that's different. And so of course, I think that we should start sooner with how we educate students on what the world is really made of and what our environment is really made of. I mean, you go a couple miles in any direction, it may look different. So
Mm-hmm.
I agree that we should help get the message out sooner so people are a lot have a lot more
More
perspective.
well equipped.
Yes, and when you give perspective, you also give the ability for someone to have empathy and be
Mm.
able to understand what someone else is going through.
All right, thank you. So, is there any last messages you want to give out for this an essay, final project, podcast interview with the Destiny Saunders?
Yes, that is me. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to say what I have to say. I'm grateful to see you growing in your journey. And that this is a nice opportunity, I think, to see how the work that you're going to be doing really plays out in real life. And so I know we learn a lot in school, and then it's like, well, how do I apply it? Well, it's nice that you're now, while still in school, are learning how this really affects real life situations. So I think
Mhm.
this was a great opportunity for this. So thank you for having me.
Yes, and thank you to my professor for allowing us to do something creative and not just your typical essay final exam. This is something that, like she just said, something that is real life, and we talk about real life experiences, and something that I can use with the tools that I'm learning. So thank you for that. And that is all. I hope you guys enjoy this and took something away from it. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.